when you realize that all prices are falling in the marginal cost of production, and you realize the chase to essentially the new peer-to-peer internet is bounded by energy and creating energy abundance at the same time.
Yeah.
And the abundance that flows to human beings in the form of prices falling lower and lower and lower, those block rewards, even out 80 years from now, are lots. And there will still be a market competing to you don't have to create more fees to be able to create that incentive when you measure in Bitcoin. You only think you do when you measure in fiat. It's one of those examples that, because people can't see what this actually means, because they're looking from this lens out instead of this lens back.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say the AI piece, I feel like supercharges the good that Bitcoin mining will do in the world, because it pushes Bitcoin mining, it's competition in places where you can do both. And the margins with AI are much greater. Right? So per kilowatt hour, it makes a lot more sense. So it pushes mining further out to the fringe. Now we're looking at Ethiopia, super crowded trade. And Ethiopia, to your point, is a perfect example of what you just said for two reasons. First, when you are there, you will see how people will always find a way, even when the fiat system has created the most dire of circumstances. You will find people that find the most innovative business models to survive, right? That's number one. And number two is they have created energy abundance through misallocation of capital, electricity abundance, I should say. Largest hydro dam in Africa. People have heard me speak about this. They're using 15% of it, right? And Bitcoin mining goes exactly there and says, thank you very much for your misallocation of capital. You created electricity abundance for us. Now we're going to come and soak it all up.
Listen to this. You'll love this. In Malawi, who was just there, they had their currency revalued again by about 50%.
The kwacha, right?
Kwacha. I was there, and the IMF imposed things like this. You have to build you have to build solar charging stations for EVs in Malawi. In Malawi. Yeah. There isn't an EV in sight in Malawi. The average wage is $2 a day.
And it gets more ridiculous.
More ridiculous. Yeah. And the IMF is making them do this to be able to save the planet. So what's happening? So a whole bunch of Bitcoin miners are going in and creating free energy on these things that have been misallocated to capital, just exactly like you said, and it's moving the new system faster. So I'm hopeful because the incentives of this, you said something interesting, and I totally agree. Did Bitcoin come at the right time? If you look at how human progress emerges, it's always this. We solve problems, right? And where there's problems, there's always insight to solve that problem. There's so many people, and that go and race and solve that problem, and then we solve that problem, and we go on to the next problem, and we go on to the next problem, and all of that solving problems is what I'm talking about in deflation, right?
Yeah,
that's what it looks like. So if you don't believe we can solve problems, right, then you live in a control structure. Where others pretend to solve them for you, and it'll look a lot like it does.
Yeah. No, again, I mean, I want to get into this energy abundance piece because, again, coming from that sort of African angle, founding my company around the premise of bringing more hash rate to Africa, development aid has, I don't think, created
terrible,
much more misallocation than in Africa, where
it held progress back.
Yeah, you can't find
100%
more on it. Like Ethiopia could be one of the richest nations in the world if they took this seriously, because they've got 90% hydro dams or 90% hydroelectricity in their grid mix, and it's just super cheap, right? And they could again be one of the most prospering nations in the world.
So this is really important because if you're again inside this, there's a lot of people that think, okay, why isn't Africa doing this? And we need to give them more aid, and it's just a natural thing out of the system. What it actually really is today we have, and I hate saying this, so this is one of the hard things for me to unpack, Today we have slavery.
Oh, yeah.
We just don't move the slaves to us. We keep them there, and we revalue their currencies so we can extract their raw materials, and then we tell ourselves they can't have food costs. So we have slavery today, It's just through a financial system that keeps them there. So no wonder they get on boats to try to get to the country that's stealing from them.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you realize how horrific that is, and there are so many people unlocked from being able to provide their minds to a network that is in service to us, you can't go back. But it's connected to this thing, and so all of those people, there's like you said, that aid, that IMF, it imposes this hardship to keep them there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's, again, I use it as a very good example. Ethiopia has two options, right? To bring electricity to people, you need transmission and distribution. That costs a lot of money. In Africa in general, if you look at the continent, transmission and distribution is not very well built out. And I'm very certain that the future is decentralized energy pockets and people moving to them wherever there is generation capacity, right? So Ethiopia has two options. Either they can accept the IMF money, the development aid money, to say, hey, we need to build out these grids to bring power to people, to stop deforestation. Okay, cool. Then you need to make your people even more poor so that you can pay back the loans that you'll never pay back anyway, right? Or they can say, hey, let's invite everybody that wants to come, take the perceived risk, take a foot into the water and start mining here, produce revenue from the energy resources that we have, and use that money coming in to build out that infrastructure, right? And I think there's many, many more examples like this. We all know Gridless very well. They do a great job of this. Yep. It's all private. There's nobody meddling in there, And there's a lot of hydro dams, for instance, that cannot be, with the current sort of classic methods, cannot be financed, because nobody's going to finance a 5 megawatt hydro dam when 4 megawatts of it are stranded. Right? And then saying, hey, we got these Bitcoin miners, they're going to send you out the door, because to them it's not a bankable customer, right? All the Bitcoin miners say, thank you very much, that's cheap power, let's do it, And here's one more thing that I want to say is, to some extent, the Bitcoin price has, I think, an effect on how much Bitcoin can do for the current system, because when Bitcoin was worth nothing, there were no multi-million companies that could build capex for electricity infrastructure, right? But now that Bitcoin is at 60, 70, wherever it's going to go, all of a sudden you've got a market cap. You can take on debt. You can now say, hey, I'm going to invest in electrical infrastructure and help Bitcoin mining flourish through it, right? So there's some paradox there as well.
I like the idea of framing Bitcoin as an option on future prosperity. And essentially this option is constantly repriced. So essentially, it just essentially is a pivot, and it's a proxy for how much do people distrust the existing system, and how much do they trust that this is actually a viable platform to build a prosperous future. And obviously, I understand why legacy institutions are scared of this thing, scared to death. I mean, by design, it intermediates the entire existing legacy institutions. So this representative institutionalism in which we live in, which was super comfortable for quite a while, is essentially already discounted fully. Yeah. A lot of unproductive stuff that is essentially done peer-to-peer. And I think what is different about Bitcoin in the context of how connected the world has become, information just flows incredibly fast. So information velocity is enormous. That's why the comparison to the gold ETFs in 2004 is completely ridiculous. Yeah, it is not gold. It is not one single thing. It's a multitude of things, and everybody can come in through their individual angle and can generate value for him or herself and bridge this to their communities back. We have spies in all institutions. We have sleeper cells in all institutions. And I would argue this is exactly what you should say. This is because you will never, as an outsider, get the social capital, the relationships, the intimacy with these groups that you would never have access to, as compared to a sleeper cell who is orange pilled within those institutions, and you can multiply the message. Yeah. And then you have one standard that coordinates globally. I mean, that's the most incredible idea that you can possibly think of. So it's ridiculous to think that you stop this anyways, but I understand why you would try to. And so I think this is a lot of I love the diversity within this group, and everybody comes in through their individual angle. And I think once you leave the baggage behind and in front of the door, it becomes a huge asset to the community. Now, and exactly, I'm not arguing anyone should now convert to a climate change believer. Because you are in this space, you are producing that positive outcomes.
Whether you want to or not.
You are my friend. Yeah. I support you. And in an inelastic systems, you will generate value for everybody.
And the output of what you creates value for everybody else.
Correct.
The people who drive the change often don't care about money because they've got a ton of it and they've been patted on the back by the existing system enough. So how do we get those guys? Because I'm here because number go up, right? Back in the day, number went up. Found the system, understood energy. Okay, shit, now I'm here talking to, two great people about deep shit on Bitcoin mining and the existing system. It's a fantastic ride. But the question is, how do we accelerate this? How do we get people that don't really care about the money, that are capital allocators, to see this and to stop?
So in time, they will. How did Galileo get people to realize that the sun didn't rotate around the earth, right?
Yeah.
It was a truth. And how did that happen? He took a telescope and looked outside the system that everybody else was measuring. And he had the only telescope that looked outside the system. And now there was a new truth that people had to reconcile with. And they fought it. And they fought him, put him in jail. And they fought, but the new truth outside of the system was the truth. And then eventually it imposed, people all of a sudden saw it. What this is, what you're talking about is, you have a system that can't solve any of the problems. It makes everything worse. And most people think there is a solve from within that system. And they in turn take all of their energy and they make all the problems worse. And they fight with each other within that system. And it gains strength by dividing people within that on every different issue. And so when will those people see? Eventually, because this is the truth. And as more people just, okay, they hit, you said something, I said something. They start to see it, and then they start to investigate, and they start to remove their baggage. And once they find out all of the things they used to believe in are actually a lie, they start to go deeper down the rabbit hole. But that's hard to because why I said one of the hard ones for me was the exploitation. If you have a system that has to systematically exploit people, then as a derivative, if I'm in the winning country, I'm an exploiter. That was really hard to believe, that all of my hard work had a cost on somebody in Africa, had a direct cost, that because I didn't want to believe that. It's me, right? It's all me. But if I was born somewhere else, I didn't have this opportunity because I would have been the ones exploited from. And so when you actually realize that, you have two choices. It can't be true. I'm going to fight it, right? I'm going to ignore it, put my head in the sand, or I'm going to investigate it and do something about it. And that's a hard thing to go through. And I understand why people hit this point, and it's just too much for them to deal with. So they had to go back to the safety of their old system and say, oh, those guys are crazy. I understand it, but eventually it won't matter because this is the reality and it's going to impose it.